Hi everyone, so busy taking my mic off mute, I was looking the wrong way. So welcome to another live stream. It's great to have you here. It feels like such a long time since the last one, it's probably only a month. But in that time, I've done a couple of days of modelling on the diorama, and we're going to talk about that. But first up, thanks to everyone for joining. It's a Sunday night. Thank you for sitting here and watching me talk. And if you're watching it on catch up, thank you for joining in later. I rarely make live streams when they come out because quite often they're in the US and the timing just doesn't work, or I'm busy, and I normally catch up later, so don't feel guilty. But for those of you who did make it, thank you so much. Let's just see. Ooh. Okay, welcome to everybody. Now, I've seen people from across the pond, from Italy, from Instagram, which isn't actually a country, but you know what I mean. So I hope you're all here to enjoy yourself while we talk about Dagobah, but also about other things. I know someone asked me about basic tools and materials last time, and I said I'd cover it a bit in this sort of episode. Basically, Dagobah, it's trees, but it's very repetitive. So it's an hour and a half of video, but you're doing the same thing for a lot of it. So I thought it would be good to have a couple of other topics to chat about while we're doing it. And I'll talk more about trees in general because trees are just great. I love them, but they can be quite time consuming. Right, we've got Southwest Germany coming in, Canada. Wow, loads and loads of people. Germany, definitely. So, welcome everybody. Now, before we get started, I can put the video going in the background. It's about an hour and a half, so we've got a bit of time at the beginning and end. So I thought I'd just say, how's everyone doing? What have you all been up to? And you're going to flood the chat with it, and it will take me ages to catch up. But, you know, my weekend's been a bit odd. Just like, I'm trying not to model at weekends. Now, for all of you who work in the week and do modelling as a hobby at weekends, that's what I always used to do. But what I found is, since I went full time, I model through the week, and then I model a weekend, and it's all work. So I'm trying to have a month of November and actually December as well, where I do something different at the weekend to modelling, and I don't spend it doing video editing and writing books and all that kind of stuff. So this weekend I've been playing Mass Effect Andromeda. Don't worry, no dioramas from that coming up. Not really sure what I would do, but it's fun. But I'm really waiting for Halo Infinite to come out in a couple of weeks. It's out on the 8th of December, and I will be playing Halo. Hopefully take a couple of days off work, play it, and I'm going to visit a friend in Dorset around that time as well. So get away for have a bit of a break. One of the problems of being self-employed, and I'm sure anybody who is self-employed knows this, you just work because there's nothing to stop you. There's the concept of work-life balance kind of goes out the window. But this kind of weekend derailed a bit last night. I was going to do loads of advertising for this live stream, put stuff out on Instagram, you know, all that kind of stuff, put a post on YouTube. And my mum twisted her knee in the middle of the afternoon. Now, she had sciatica and was in bed for a couple of months earlier this year, around about April. And I think she's been stressing out other bits as well. So we kind of did the whole, it'll get better, iced it. And then she still couldn't, it's getting into the toilet, real palaver. I was dragging her around on a chair. So anyway, we iced it and eventually called 111, who said, "Oh, you could do with an X-ray. We'll get an ambulance out," which was, we didn't really want an ambulance out. You know, we don't like calling 999 or anything. But they came out at about 11 o'clock at night, and they were brilliant and so nice. So they stayed for about an hour. So if I look a little blotto, it's because I'm just like, yeah, my mind's been in sorting out things like that. But the fun thing about modelling is it's a great escape. And we can get away from all the trials and tribulations of life. So that's enough of them. We're going to put those in a box and put them on one side. And tonight it's all about the modelling. Wow, let's just see wow, loads of people arriving. Hi to everybody. If I don't say hi personally, it's just because otherwise I spent all the time on my first live stream just looking at the list going, hi, and then I didn't really say much. So I thought before we kicked off on Dagobah, we'd talk just a little bit about trees, because that's what I was doing this week. Well, it's 2 days worth of modelling on the diorama, and there's loads of different ways you can make trees, but these are really big. So it's 1 to 48. It's bigger than you would normally do in most scales, because most people model HON, something like that. But if you're doing O scale, you might do trees this size, because technically it is an O scale character, 1 to 48 in America. Obviously in Britain it's 1 to 43.5, but let's just gloss over that difference. So it's O scale, great, but I couldn't put a normal model tree on this because these are sci-fi fantasy trees and they're massive. Right, let's have a look what's down here. Yeah. So when you're trying to look at trees, and I normally do HO trees when I'm doing trees, you can use all of the same techniques. And I've used the technique that I did on this for everything through up to 1/6. And that's because the bigger they get, the more you have to do things like the bark to make it look good. But for smaller trees like HO, you can get away with almost just painting any details on and putting a rough texture on, and you don't need to worry too much. So I'm just going to give you my little exposition on trees. And if anyone has any great comments, add them in, but bear in mind there's a bit of a lag, so I don't see them straight away. So first up, I've just seen someone said, I see Mel's not doing a live shoot. I'm not aiming to compete with the terrain tutor. He's a great guy. So, you know, no competition at least tonight on that one. So, trees. I have a concept on trees, and my book which got an advertising release on email, which totally surprised me earlier this week when I saw my name on an email as, upcoming. I wrote a book on how to build realistic model railroad scenery. Get your own title right, Kathy. And it's coming out I was really excited. I thought it was the 2nd of January for about a day. And then I remembered that it's American, so it's coming out on the 1st of February. But it's coming out next year. And it made me go back to basics and do everything from scratch again. Loads of photos, loads of my views on how to do realistic modelling. And it works in any scale. So this is 1:48. It's in the background here. It's O scale. But you can do the same techniques for the majority of stuff, from everything from Z's pushing it a bit, but N, H, O, O and bigger. So, trees. How would I model trees? First up, my concept is you spend the most time on a model on stuff that is near the front. If you're doing dioramas, it's slightly different because it's mostly all near the front. But if you're doing a model railroad or a big diorama with a lot of depth, you can force the perspective a little bit by making the front of the diorama more detailed. That's the bit people see, they spend the most time looking at it, and they assume everything else looks as good because basically the mind is tricked into thinking if this bit looks good, everything behind must be. But when you look at a photo, the stuff behind just looks out of focus slightly, doesn't it? Just a little bit out of focus, quite often. So in your modelling, if it's slightly less detailed toward the back, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. So let's have a look. Someone's been being hell let loose. Dr. Force 2010. Yeah, thanks. I'm hoping my mum gets better too. Thank you very much. Okay, another training flight yesterday. Best yet. Well done, Stephen. Learning to fly. And someone had to go and change their duvet cover. Dramatic life. Bad timing, I would say. Yeah, change them in the morning. Anyway, back to trees. So, trees. I would therefore, if I want to do the background a little bit fuzzier, not quite as detailed, I wouldn't model trunks. I would never use scale leaves. I'd probably use something more commercial. Quite often I bought really cheap eBay trees, very small ones, and I'd make them look smaller because things get smaller in the distance. So there they'd be, background trees, quite small, quite indistinct. You can still do wire trees and put grass on and all the things we'll talk about for the middle ground and foreground trees, but doesn't need as much detail. And the colours need to be slightly more faded. You don't want bright stuff up there because it'll drag the eye towards the back. And this applies mostly to model railroad scenery because if you're doing a diorama, you don't really have the depth. But for model railroads, we're trying to force it to look like an entire world in a couple of feet at most for our layouts. So, okay, background trees, easy, very, very indistinct. Middle ground trees. I tend to buy commercial ones and maybe put a bit extra flock on, maybe the odd scale leaf. And commercial plastic trees generally have very shiny plastic trunks. You can make them yourself from armature and spread out polyfibre, or you can just add leaves to existing ones. I've gone the latter route. and I've painted the trunks to make them look much better. Quick way to paint, just put on some matte paint and put a wash on, and it will bring out the detail that's generally there. It's just a bit shiny. Okay. Do you never make a wire tree, says Carl. Yes, I do make wire trees when I have time. So we're on to foreground trees, and this is where I'd use the wire trees. Wire trees take a while. I did a halo diorama earlier this year, and I did conifer trees. I'm trying to think how many I did. Probably did about 10 or 12. I just used a couple of spare ones that were not on the one back then, on the existing, the one I've just done this week. So I just finished a halo diorama this week, and the video went out for my patrons. I'll put it out next week because I suddenly realised otherwise I'd be in danger of putting a video out on Friday and then the live stream out on Sunday, which would, you know, just probably tank YouTube in some weird way, because that's what YouTube's like. So anyway, it's going to go out next week, and it's the explosion. It's got a couple of trees down at the bottom. So I would always use wire trees, but they take a while because you have to twist all the wire. And for the conifers, I do a wooden trunk and then shove in bits of wire, either twisted, maybe a couple of pieces bent over so it looks a little thicker on the bottom branches, or just thin branches. But wire trees, I've found sometimes look like lollipops on a trunk if you're not careful. So I've tended to go with adding quite a dense wire tree and then static grass in sort of 10-12 mil over the top. You can put polyfibre, and for a summer or a spring tree, that works great. Polyfibre is just a very thin, you buy it from Wooden Scenics, it's already green, you stretch it out into a really thin, loose mesh, and you just put it over the top. And then you put on a bit of ground foam to bulk it out, and then you put your scale leaves on, because it's a foreground tree. Now you can use this in the middle ground, you can use it in the background. You just make them slightly smaller. The big problem with wire trees is just making enough good bark if it's a foreground tree. So I've tried loads and loads of different ways to do bark, but let's just check the comments and I'll come back. Perspective is important. Yeah, just had a discussion on Discord, vaccines versus plain blue. The trick is to use trees between the back and forefront items to break it up and give relative perspectives. Trees are brilliant. They're big, so they act as view blocks. They can go into a backdrop because you can paint the backdrop or the trees to more or less match each other so they can go in. They're just a brilliant back sort of exit to whatever it is you're doing. And I still put backdrops on my dioramas. So I did it on the Halo one. I quite often will think about having backdrops on them so that when you take photos you get a better view. Making your own sculptor mould. Well done, Macero siding. That's good. I still buy mine. It's just cheating, I know, but it's easy. I just use a tree. Now it's a big job, and the council don't go mental when they catch you in the park with a chainsaw. I'm intrigued how you'd shrink a tree to fit on one of my dioramas. You know, do let me know, Admiral. What's your favourite tree in real life and favourite tree to model? I like modelling conifers, to be honest, because I like the way they come out. I think they look really good. If I had to choose a favourite tree in real life, it would probably be something like a silver birch, because they're just such a nice tree. They've got a nice white bark and they've got nice delicate leaves, and I've got a weeping one in my garden, so I like silver birches. Weeping willows, but they're a bit thuggish. Can't really beat an oak tree, you know, just that standard English oak. So a lot of good trees out there. I like field maple, which is the only UK Acer, I think. And that's a really nice, just small-leaved maple in the UK. But all our trees just go yellow or brown in the summer to autumn sort of period. We don't really get a nice autumn showing off any of them. So yes, it's true they take time, but they do look better, the Carl says about the wire trees. First tree I had trees to scratch build looked about as natural as a line of stilettos. My first tree, I didn't bend the wire enough, so it was really leggy. And it was like, it just went out, and then the leaves were over here, you know, off screen almost. It was awful. I mean, it's still on my layout, but it was awful. Yeah. Would all these tips work for fish tankscapes? I don't know, because I've not put anything in a fish tank to know how it would work with water on it. I'm guessing it would if your glue could be sorted, but they all need glue to glue the leaves on. So I just don't know how you'd attach the glue so it wouldn't come off. You'd have to think about the glue a lot. Can't be stored to purchase. You can reserve it. Yeah, and just on the book, you can get it from Carnback. A lot of people ask me about where to get it in the UK. I've always found the Carnback books come through on sort of resellers, because it will go out to all the distributors. So it will come onto Amazon, your local model shops, things like that. So if you're in the UK, you don't have to get it on Carnback. There will be probably a UK supplier which will have much cheaper shipping, obviously. But it takes a while to percolate through that distribution tree to see who's going to have it here, as opposed to people in the US, because it's only out on the Carnback site. And I was surprised it had come out so early. But there we are, available to pre-order now. Right, conifers make me itch. Sorry, Ben. Oh, trees are so important. Demo with the principal here. Excellent. I don't know which YouTube channel that is, but it looks good. Yeah, Ian brings up a really important point about how tall trees are. You go and stand by your house and you look at the trees, and I guarantee so many of the trees are as tall or taller than your house. But if you look at them in model scale, people don't like to make them that tall because it overpowers. Poplars, things like that, are massively tall. So I think the answer there is go have a look at photos. They're a great backdrop. They're a very tall backdrop. And just if you've got a house, scale accordingly. If there's nothing else around, you can start playing with the height to force perspective. But if you've got a house, then they need to stay in perspective with a house or something. Otherwise, they just look weird. Or they look like a bush. I applaud big oak trees. Well done, timber. With a name like that, I think you should. Shrinkatine, I don't know. What about natural products? I use natural tree roots a lot for an awesome looking dead tree look. CT dioramas, I wish I had better natural products. So basically a tree is a trunk, and I still haven't talked about bark yet, have I? An armature with branches, something over it to bulk out the branches so you can put the leaves on. And I either use polyfibre or static grass for that, sort of long 10-12 static grass. Can be brilliant on conifers, but also on other trees. I tend to add it onto bushes and everything now. And then once I've got all of that, I'll add ground foam to bulk it a bit more, and then the scale leaves if I'm doing that. So natural will be brilliant. A lot of people use seafoam, and seafoam is Talaxia or something. It's got a posh Latin name, and it's just a shrub, I'm guessing, or some herbaceous plant that has a great seed structure that someone looked at and cut off and started to sell. And I've been using it for, I don't know, as long as I've had layouts. It's on my first layout, so it's been there for 15, 20 years. And they're great. They can be a little bent, and no matter how many times I've tried to cure them, boil them, and then straighten them, they always end up a little bit bent for me. But overall, I find I want the trunks to be a bit thicker. So I will tend to use them as branches on something else. So I've used a plastic armature before now and added seafoam on to get a much better branch structure on it. So they're a great way of adding structure in. So if you have dead roots, or I've used lavender or rosemary, any prunings that you have, perfect if you can find them the right scale. Roots, I'm not gardening a lot with that kind of stuff. My garden's done, I don't pull stuff out. They get the odd pruning, but not a huge amount. So that's all dried up for me, and I just have what's left up the loft. But you can literally just get a twiggy structure and put polyfibre over it, and you've got a tree. Really simple. If you've got a better twiggy structure and you want to show it off maybe for winter or something, you can start adding on things like seafoam to get better branches. And then you'll have that beautiful bark from the pruning itself that looks perfect. I need to keep an eye on my time so I start this video off going as well. Distribution tree, no pun. Yeah, 3D pen for tree bark. I don't have a 3D pen, but I bet that's awesome. How big that? Yeah, the sycamore tree. There's a plane tree on the corner of the road, and it's a gift that keeps on giving at this time of year with leaves. There are so many leaves. It's a massive tree. I once told them 00 scale a tree is roughly the size of a Mark 1 coach on its end. Can believe it? That would be about 12 inches, wouldn't it? I always work on 12 inches for a coach, so yeah, just simple. Gordon Gravitt, is it Gordon Gravitt? Has some amazing books on trees. I have them. He's got conifers, they're over here. Conifers, trees, and then grassland. If you're interested in more detailed modelling specific trees, they are excellent books and you should get them. They are Wild Swan, I think, or something. They're the white ones with the black writing on the side. Brilliant, very, very good. So, timber's given you the Latin name, and then sagebrush. It's hard to get sagebrush in the UK, but I think in the US sagebrush is really popular and is good, and I certainly would use it more if I had it around. But bark, just quickly, I've tried 3D printing, worked brilliantly actually, really good, because you're only printing the trunk bit so it doesn't get too fine. I tried crepe paper because it has that wrinkly texture, worked alright actually. You have to wrap it, and then there's a seam, but gluing it on, it worked really well. And then, you know, I've used things in glue like sawdust, ground foam, things like that. And when you're doing wire trees, you will need to have some kind of concoction to get rid of the wire twists. So you do your bark and getting rid of the wire twists at the same time with a kind of concoction. I often use latex rubber. It's quite trendy and popular to use that. And it's good because it stays bendy, so you can bend the tree branches around later. It does stick to itself a bit. But a lot of, I mean, I've just used PVA with sawdust in or something like that, and ground foam if you haven't got sawdust. So they're all great things you can use. Bamboo roots. I have like gazillion bamboos and I've never think to look at their roots. It's interesting. I mean, I've used all sorts. You know, any pruning that has a branch, nice sort of structure you can use to make branches. The trick is to make sure it stays, and there are natural preservatives like glycerin and other stuff that you can dip them in to make sure they stay nice and solid. Spraying them with a lot of matte varnish and stuff like that helps, because otherwise, you know, they can give way and just almost rot over time. So what have we got? Fig tree, 70 foot tall. Yeah, you go look at the giant sequoias and they're massive. Wet plaster. Craggy lines on my face for bark. I'm sure, Ben. So drying. No wonder you've got a craggy face if you're putting plaster on it. Would you ever consider doing a Thomas and Friends diorama? And if you did, I'll come back to that one. I need to put the video to go. Geek Gaming did a mass producing trees that are indestructible. Yeah, latex is a great way. Now, I'm just going to move to putting Dagobah in the background, because otherwise I'm in danger of not getting it done in the time. So I'm just going to divert for a second to explain what's happening here. So we've been talking about trees, and for this, I was using paper mache, and this is where you saw it last time. And at this point, I decided to put the backdrops on and discovered I got a tree that was sticking out. So this is me just breaking my paper mache to get the, yep, there we go, breaking it to get the backdrop on. And the backdrops aren't going on yet, otherwise you can't video it, really. You cannot video when you've got backdrops there. So they will stay off right to the end, and they'll probably just have maybe a painted scene or a printed scene put on them. And they won't go all the way along. And we can, I mean, the diorama's in the corner there. It'll probably go halfway along the side that if you're looking on the video now on the right, and all the way along the far left side, and maybe a little bit of a return, and the back as well. So there's going to be quite a lot of diorama backdrop on it to get this misty feel. So we've been talking about bark, and this is paper mache. So that's another substance you can use. I've used it 2 or 3 times, and we looked at them last time with Halo, big tree, and a craggy tree, both in the 6th. It's the first time I've used it in 1/48. And the beauty of it here is it's not really going to show, because it's about to be covered in vines over the next hour-and-a-half playtime. Now this is 2 days sped up, so if I look a bit frantic, it's because this is faster than I was actually doing it. You wouldn't want to sit here and watch me. But whilst I'm doing the backdrops, I thought I'd just say what I use for backdrops. I don't cut wood anymore, because the only place I have to cut is my granite work surface on my kitchen table, and I'm not using power tools on that to cut wood. So this is Foamex. It's 3 or 5 mil Foamex, depending how big the backdrop is. This is the 5 mil stuff, I think. And I basically just can cut it with a knife. It's great. It glues together very simply. I use hot glue. Really grabs well with hot glue. I think it melts slightly into it, so it's very good. I suspect you can use a contact cement or something like that. So I've got all the pieces cut to size. Sadly, I then realised my diorama was a smidgen too long, so I had to go and trim it, which you'll see in a minute. But this is an exciting video of me cutting a backdrop. Exciting. So, back to Thomas the Tank Engine and friends. I would do a Thomas the Tank Engine. The original, it was way after my time as a child, but the original O scale or larger, whatever they did, those Thomas the Tanks were brilliant. It's on the it could go on the list. My list is very long and I need to get back to it, and I've got 2 other layouts to build first, sadly. But I would definitely do something with Thomas because it is just iconic. I do have a couple of 00 Thomases and James and Percy and Clarabelle and Annie and all those sorts of stuff in the Troublesome Truck, so definitely on there somewhere. Geek Gaming. Luke at Geek Gaming is a great guy. Go check out any of his videos if you want to know how to do some of the basics. You know, he will have done loads of comparisons on, you know, what glue is best or something on sticking trees. He's that kind of guy. So he has some great videos that you really can learn a lot from, and I love checking them out. Latex. Latex does take a lot of layers. Latex rubber, and Carl made that point. So it's very thin when you get it. I bought brushable latex this time from, it's Smooth On, Bentley Advanced Materials I use in the UK. So it's a big worldwide distributor. You will get brushable latex for making mould, slightly thicker. And I think the Woodland Scenic one's slightly thicker, but I've never used it. And you can put talc in, just something like talc, but I've got really lumpy results when I put talc in. So I suspect it's a bit like when you're putting corn flour into custard. You need to mix in a little bit and get it into a nice smooth paste and then do it that way. But I was impatient, tipped it in, and I just had loads. And then I tried to sieve it. So I now have a sieve with loads of rubber on it. Let's just say it wasn't a great occurrence, but you can put things into the latex to bulk it out. So I'll normally do a thin coat first and then do a thicker coat with stuff to bulk it out. Acrylic frame sealant to coat trunks. There's a lot of acrylic products in big tubes for DIY that I think would be brilliant, whether it's frame sealant or bathroom sealant. The acrylic ones are better because they don't repel the paint. That's one of the problems perhaps with using silicone sealant, but all the acrylic sealants you can then paint over ones. They're the ones you can use. They'd be really good, but I just find them a bit sticky. So they're hard to paint on, and I like to be able to paint it on with a brush. So I tend to go with things that are a little bit thinner than some of those, but I suspect you can thin those with water as well if you want it. Okay. Thing is though, now I want to see the long lost Disco World. Disco World. Let me know what you actually mean by that. For dry flower branches, flower heads, I creep through the local cemetery at night. You really shouldn't be doing that, Nick. At the Perth exhibition one year, there was a guy making trees out of florist wire coated with hot glue and sprayed with Halford's grey primer. It was amazing how quickly it came together. Yes, and that's more or less what I use. I use florist wire, and I don't use hot glue, but the hot glue is a great idea. But I use florist wire. It's brilliant. I use about 28 or 32 or 24, depending which bit of the branch and trunk I'm doing. And I bend them over and use them a lot. It's really handy if you get the 12-inch strips because they're about the right length, so you don't have to cut it and it's straighter. So it's not bending all over the place when you're trying to work with it. So I definitely recommend florist wire for the wire. But I have got some welding wire, which I've used in the past. And if you want to do really fine, smaller scale trees, there are some multi-stranded wires. As long as it holds its shape and doesn't spring back, that's what you need. I need a longer ruler. I do. That's actually my decorating ruler, but it's not great for cutting because it's too thick. So yeah, the yellow one's the decorating one. I like the acrylic one with the metal edge because you can see through and it doesn't slip. My aluminium ruler slips a lot, which is really annoying. Yeah, definitely Mark. Are you thinking about the Bachmann G-scale, Thomas? I'm not sure what Thomas would be. That's a lot down the line. The trouble with G-scale is you run out of space very quickly. So I would say I'd do a little moving Thomas. I'd do it in the 00 Bachmann one because, I mean, I've got it from 10, 15 years ago. So I presume they've still got it. Somebody's brought it out recently again, I think, for Christmas. It may be Hornby now. But yeah, there's definitely loads of Thomases around in 00 at some point. Thixotropic, nice word, Timber. Disco World made more sense when looking at your silver trees. Oh, right, I was thinking it was like Terry Pratchett disco novels or something, but yeah, or perhaps even short for Discovery, but yeah, it definitely is very foily at the moment. So we'll come back to what I'm doing in a sec because it's a little off camera. I do thin down the frame seam with a bit of water. Forgot to say that. Oh, that's good. Tamsin P. I thought you might need to. It's just so hard to get to. It's great for putting onto things, but I find it's easier to apply thinner stuff. And Timber, you have huge boxes of hydrangea flower heads for my next attempt at trees. Yeah, I've got hydrangea and I keep looking at it. I tell you the other one that's brilliant is Buddleia. Not for the flower heads, but for the sort of branches, because it's quite tall and straight and it grows a lot. And once they get thick, I mean, somebody gave me some that were this sort of thickness and they were brilliant. I used them on a 00 scale, it was HO scale, logging layout. Was it ON30? ON30 logging layout. It's absolutely brilliant. Really, really perfect bark. And you can drill holes in it and then put in some branches of some herbaceous plant coming out and start your conifers off. So Buddleia was great trunks for things. So I'm still playing around with backdrops and making sure they fit onto Dagobah. Now, these are quite weird trees really. And I've shown the photos over the last few sessions of this, and there's definitely a lot of really, really weird sort of trees. So I've been to a swamp in Georgia and it wasn't that exciting. And I've been to swamps in sort of roundabout Louisiana and they are much more interesting. And you have that beautiful sort of buttress root effect. Mangroves have these kind of roots that come up out of the water to breathe, I suspect. And you get that lovely effect at the bottom. Now these don't really have that in the same way, but they have a huge amount of tendril roots coming down. And I can't tell how much of them are supposed to be roots and how much is supposed to be vines. So at this point, I've got mocked in some really big ones for structural support, which I did in the foil and covered them with paper mache. And then I'm going to go back and add far more as this progresses. Okay, so thumbs up for hydrangea from Digger. Ian says, Backman now have Thomas. Hornby lost it last year. I think it was Backman years ago when I bought mine, because I don't remember Hornby really doing much around that time. I think it was when they were on their downs. So I think it was Backman back then, but they're not chipped or anything, and I only run DCC, so I probably would need to look at DC or something for it. What are those shelves behind you lit with? LED strips? Yeah, Ben, they're I got a carpenter to make the shelves, so they're just asymmetric. I designed them, MDF, painted gloss black, and then just LED strips stuck on. I tried channels and it didn't work as well, so it's best literally, the shelves are just a little bit off the wall, and then the LED reflects on the back of the wall that's behind it, because they're just, you know, there's no back to the shelves except the wall. Brilliant, works really, really well, and you can stick it on. And I've actually got them wired into the light switch because I had an electrician in it done ages ago. So they come on with a light switch. They're not on a plug socket, but you could do it as easily on a plug socket if you wanted to. If you're learning like me, hit the like button. Thanks, Timber. Multi-strand wire trees can be stiffened up by tinning the wire after bending and shaping. I can imagine you could also put quite a lot of solder into the main trunk to hold it together. But solder is expensive, as Timber says. PVA glue and grout is much cheaper. Yeah, I mean, I use PVA glue so much. And we'll talk about basic tools and materials in a minute. I wanted to do trees because we're starting off with trees first. But PVA glue is probably my number one glue that I use. I've just bought 10 litres of it. I've used 5 litres in the last year. It's so sad. What's it going in? I mean, it just dries out to practically nothing. But yeah, 5 litres just gone on dioramas. Yeah, and Ian makes a point that he's got the solder on the shelf. It's really important that if you have something, you use it. I use all sorts of stuff. So for my latest Halo diorama is just finished, I wanted something to mount everything on, and I had a metal base to an old 3D printer that had broken, and I just used that. and it's important. I could have bought a base, I could have bought a picture frame, I could have done all sorts of things, but sometimes just going through and keeping all the bits and bobs and using what's there, whatever's cheapest for you. So if you're a carpenter, you can get hold of sawdust easily, throw that in there. If you can't get hold of sawdust, and apparently you can go to B&Q and ask for the floor sweepings, but if you don't want to go to B&Q and look embarrassing asking them, can you have some sawdust, then you can always put ground foam in or something like that instead. There's always a way around it with something. I don't think you can buy sawdust, but I know for people making the homemade sculptor mould, some people use toilet roll. You can actually, certainly in America, they use a lot of cellulose fibre insulation, which apparently is a very common insulation over there. I looked and didn't really find it much over here, and it's the same thing. So, there's loads of different ways you can make the same product a lot of times. And with trees and bark, it's more or less the same. There are many routes, no pun intended, to get to a good looking tree. At the end of the day, the most important thing you can get is a photo of the tree you want to model and copy it. Because my mind is never on track of what things actually look like. And I have to go back to photos all the time. And then I'm like, I don't think it looked like that. Oh, badly remembered, Kathy. Good thing I checked the photo. Okay, so I have to go. Bye, Martha. I'm up to my armpits in turkey dressing as Thanksgiving is just around the corner. Oh, well, have a great Thanksgiving for those people who celebrate it, whether you're Canadian or American. The Canadians have theirs. I know they were a bit earlier. Anyway, enjoy it. Have a good one. Thanks, Martha, for stopping by while you could. So, releases of 3D printed tree armatures. They look very good. I have some designed myself in 3D, but yet to try printing them. I did 3D print them, and I didn't do it too fine. I just did the base trunks and then put on wire armatures on top of them and glued them into place, because I think the tree I was doing had been pollarded. So there was quite a thick trunk up to a certain height, and then it went really quite spidery. It was an oak tree, so I'm guessing at some point it had a major branch off, if nothing else. So yeah, it's a great way to start. I did mine in resin, and you get beautiful texture, and it's very easy to put that texture onto a 3D print with some programs. So it's a quick way if you know that. If you don't know how to do that, then it takes you forever Googling it the first time. But once you've worked it out, it's displacement maps and bumps and all sorts of things. But actually, it's really quite a simple way, I think, once you've worked it out, to get loads of really good trees quite quickly, because you can get loads of bark textures online that you can apply to tree trunks once you've got the basic method mastered. Pet shop for sawdust. Oh, I always thought the sawdust in a pet shop was too big. It was like shavings rather than dust, but of course it might not be. Good one. So there we are. That's where you go for your sawdust. Pet shop. So Ravenson Express, thank you very much for your sawdust offer. I don't really use it because I've never had it, but I will have to think now where I can use it, so you can send me a big bag. Thanks. Canadians have apology day, roughly the same idea. Is it graded? Tutorial on how to do it. How to do trees. I did the conifers as part of Halo, and I did the I did all these tutorials earlier in the year for I think they went on Patreon and the channel, and I need to actually do something with the Patreon ones. I was going to produce a list, and then I promptly forgot I was going to do that, because actually I've done a lot of this stuff when I was doing it for the book, and I put it on Patreon as a how-to. I did probably a quick something. I did a starting scenery, 5 minutes on trees. And at the same time as that, I did do a wire tree and show how to do it, because I did photos for it, which I took off video. So I'm pretty sure the videos are out there, but they may be on Patreon, not on the general channel. But certainly twisted wire trees I've used a lot in time. So there will be back on one of my dioramas. I will have done one. And they will be, I think it's palm trees is the next tree I have to do. So they'll probably be coming up. I've got palm trees coming up at some point, because I'm doing Pirates of the Caribbean with skeleton zombie pirates for those who want that, but just a nice beach scene for those who want that. So that's coming up soon. Been coming up soon for a while. It keeps getting bumped by Halo, because Halo's 20th anniversary is out. I'm quite excited by Halo. So Right, so I thought I'd missed the Canadian one. Happy American one's at the end of the month, isn't it? So yeah. Put texture on 3D armature. Okay, super. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about these trees. So the first thing I had was I haven't put the backdrops on so I can reach the back of the trees, but my trees didn't actually reach the backdrops when I put them in place. So I had a gap. So having done my trees, they had sagged forward a bit. Now this was a problem. I should have put something into the base to hold them, like the coat hangers, which I couldn't find, or even bamboo skewers. But this is such a thin foam base, there isn't enough of it to really hold the foil upright. So I put the first layer on, let it sag forward a bit, and I pulled it back and used masking tape to pull it back, and very exciting jury rigging because I hadn't expected it to move that much. And then the foil here, I'm just bulking out now so it goes to the diorama back, so that when you look down, you don't see a really thin, skinny, weird tree that's quite long this way, but very thin in the other direction. So this was basically just foil, just like you saw last time when I was doing the base and I went on and did the trees. So most of the tree is foil and more paper mache. Now up till now I'd been using Celluclay, which is an American product, and it's by Activa. It's grey, it's the grey version. And I put a dollop of PVA glue in, and I made it too sticky the first time and it was sticking everywhere. So I waited for all that to go off and I came back and did more. And it's just basically, it's paper mache, dollop of PVA glue, bit of water so that it's not sticky, and put it on with a glove. It needs a glove because it dries your hands out a lot otherwise. And I put it on. Now you can leave it, you have to leave this to dry. This is not a quick method, but paper mache is quite cheap. Except Celluclay isn't, because it's shipped from the US. So when I ran out of Celluclay and I came to do it again, and I was like, I need more. I need far more than I have here. I went with a British version called Art Mache, which was white. It's almost identical. It's just a cellulose fibre of some sort. It's a very powdery sort of paper mache. It's not like you're ripping up shreds of newspaper. It's like a powder which you add water to, and it creates a paste, and just the glue helps it with the cracking, because it will crack if you put it on too thickly or too thinly. Actually, I think it cracks if you put it too thinly. So for this, I put on loads of Celluclay in grey and tried to just make the back meet where the backdrops were going to be, so it looked good when I put the backdrops on, but that it didn't stick past them, so I couldn't put the backdrops on, because that would be awesomely bad. Okay, so that's what I'm doing at the moment, an awful lot of putting on of paper mache on trees. Now you can use paper mache in HO scale for bark. It is almost fine enough. And people ask why I didn't do this with Sculptamold on the first stream, and the answer is paper mache has a better texture in this scale. Sculptamold has paper in, but it's a little bit lumpier almost. So this is all about getting a finer texture, because this will show through. Now I had a debate, and I'm not sure I did it right, whether to paint pre or post putting the vines on. And I probably should have painted before I put the vines on, but I didn't. So I did the paper mache, I let it dry for about 4 or 5 days at least for it to go off, and I came back and did a bit more paper mache, and then we went on to vines, which we'll get to later on this evening. Great video work there. Right. Pirates. Ooh, sounds exciting. I hope so. I need to put a bit more humour in my dioramas, I think, so I think this one will be quite humorous, I hope. Greetings to everyone. Hi Hasta of Carcosa. Swamp looks like it's turning out nice. I didn't feel like it changed that much at this point, but it will change in a minute when the vines go on. That's when it really started to look better and stuff more like that. Thingiverse has several trees to download and 3D print to get people started. Yeah, that's true. Thanks, Vez. I do think the pirate one sounds cool. I'm looking forward to doing that one. I've been looking forward to do it for about 6 months now. And it's coming up once I've got my water splash out of the way, which is what I'm doing, a mongoose, a halo mongoose, going through the water with a big splash at the moment. Just waiting for some stuff to go off so I can do the resin next week, which is tomorrow now, isn't it? Ravenson Express says he uses a colander from the kitchen to get finer stuff. I have a range of sieves. You can never have too many sieves. Garden sieves. There's such a thing as a garden sieve for grading soil for big stuff. And then I use kitchen sieves, tea strainers, everything through. So a range of sieves are really useful. Right. If Admiral's going to talk about if one knows how to do seamless displacement maps and apply a morph deformation, one could 3D print a bark texture roller. I just 3D printed the bark texture onto the trunk, and because it was going against the backdrop, it didn't matter if the back had a seam on it, but it did distort a little bit in places, but it was fine. Timber used to make his own flock 45 years ago with sawdust and paint dyes. That's excellent. I tried it once. It wasn't great. Yeah, it was an experiment. I've tried it. I can say I've done it. I used foam, upholstery foam. I still have most of the packet left somewhere. It wasn't a great success. I couldn't get it fine enough, so I just use wooden scenics now. Ian says he made the sawdust flock thing, but it all went pale when it dried out. I made some coloured autumn leaves earlier. It was last year. One of my worst. I just hated it. Autumn. Oh, crashed and burned on that awfully. And I made these bright coloured ink. It was paint. Dyed it, looked fine, but when you broke them apart, it was white in the middle still and dark on the outside. So I whizzed them up in the blender, but I never felt they were quite as dark, and I probably should have dyed them a lot darker than I expected. But wood of snow is white, so it's useful if you want to add colour to something and you just don't have the colour. You can dye it, and I wanted to dye it to a slightly less lurid shade than some of the ones you buy. Yeah, and I should just painted it, I think. I think paper was a better choice anyway. Clay has more mass, will pull your trees inward under the weight, causing more detachment from the base. And that is the problem I had, Hasta, with the first set on. So what you can do is you can easily do a thin coat, which won't weigh it, wait for it to dry and then go back and do a bit more. I'm just impatient, and I'm doing 2 days of this for each live stream. And so I wanted to get it done because it's out. And if that's out, I can't have something else out to work on it. So... But I'm now onto the white art mache, and this is the over sticky mess that I made. It's got too much glue in it, so it was just sticking to everything. So I left it now to set up for a bit and came back and did it the next day. How about using nettle tea? I use it for my hay fever. You cut open the bags and just scatter the leaves on. I've never had nettle tea. I use chamomile tea, which is very, very pale, and I think that will be perfect. But I had an offer from Green Stuff World a while ago to send me some product, and I said to them, it was like March, and I thought I really should get some of this stuff sorted. So I said to them, I'm doing Dagobah Swamp, would you like to send me some resin and some water effects? And they said, what else do you want? And I was like, well, micro leaves would be great for the leaf scatter around. And so they've sent me some micro leaves. So I'll be doing a mix of their micro leaves for where I want to do close-ups of R2-D2 and Luke. And then, it's great. So I've got micro leaves, and they sent me some other dead bushy stuff, which I can use to make some grass. But Diorama Precipe also got in touch, and they're sending me loads of stuff. And I didn't want to put the two on the same. I don't like to mix suppliers when they've given me stuff, because then it gets a confused message when you're putting a link down below saying these people have great product. And I do love Green Stuff World. They have so much stuff there. It's great. So I probably am going to do a jungle with Diorama Precipes, and I just don't know what to do with it. I have ideas, but none of them are gelling in my head yet, so I need to think a bit about that. But more about that if we've got time in a minute. Right, so Carl is off to... Good night, Carl. You have to work. I go to sleep thinking about what I learned from Kathy, and tomorrow I apply those techniques, so thank you. Yeah, thanks, Carl. I hope you learned something. Trees look like dipping their feet in the water. They are definitely getting wet feet, and I haven't got the water in yet. Right. dried herbs. I have some leftover basil and stuff like that and parsley, and I've used those before now for green scatter. Because I thought, well, they're still green now, 10 years after I last used them, they'll probably stay green. But they are in an airtight container, and I think with exposure to air over time, they may brown. We'll just have to see. Speaking of Halo, do you think they might actually get an early multiplayer release tomorrow? I don't know. I signed up for their multiplayer flight without realising it was a multiplayer flight. So I've had an email to invite to play on every single one of their early betas. I just haven't, because I don't do multiplayer, I only do campaign. But I've been invited to every one of their flights so far. So they've had 2 technical flights testing various different things. So it's already out in beta anyway for that period. But I don't think it'll be going live early, because they'll take as long as possible having released it. But there may be another beta coming out. What 3D printer do I use from New Fenris Railroad? Well, I haven't bought one in a while, so just be warned that, you know, new things come out all the time. I have a Prusa for the filament printer, Mark 3S. It prints like a dog, and that's me. I just don't get on with filament. I've never got it to print well. I just put a new hot end in. I don't like filament, just let's not go there. I broke my last one by putting ABS in it, and well, it could just be because it was Chinese and it broke, but it broke. It's now the base of my Halo diorama. And that's what I do to old printers. But for my resin, I have 2. One is an Elegoo Mars. Works well. Sounds awful. One of the fans has got a battle, but it works well, prints well, beautiful quality. Never had a problem levelling it. Levelled straight out of the bat. Always been fine. Could never get my Anycubic Photon, the first one, to level ever. And eventually it broke. So I don't touch Anycubic now. Which, you know, just I don't. There's maybe nothing wrong with them now, but I've had 2 of them break on me. And then the other printers are Peopoly Phenom, which is big. I wouldn't recommend it unless you want to do really big prints and you've got a lot of money to splash on it. I use it a lot for my big stuff because I do stuff in sort of scales that are big. But there's been some other medium-sized ones come out, which will probably do the majority of people. I mean, I've got a whole spaceship in there that was this big. It's a 40cm build plate, which is build height, which is bigger than most people need, I think. But yeah. There's just so much new stuff come out since I bought mine though. I think my newest one still is about 2 years old now. So it's always new. I mean, Creality have got their Harlot, if we want to say what Luke from Geek Gaming calls them, but Halo or whatever it is, Halot, I don't even know how you pronounce it. And that's supposed to be very good, but more expensive. Really, it's just get one and have a go with it, and don't pay too much for your first one. Get your feet wet and enjoy it. So the Americans and the Australians all advocate using backyard dirt, but there is too much fibrous material in the UK soil. Best to scrape the banks from a stream, river and get the sandy mud. So if you see my Targrout video, I did say in that when I was starting model railways and I was doing American, they all said you need to use baseball diamond dirt. And I had visions of these 65-year-old men with shovels going into like some kids' playground and digging up their baseball diamonds. Apparently you can buy it in bags, or it's the brushings around the edge or something, but yeah. But they all swear by baseball diamond dirt. And the reason, very few of them have manicured yards like us. We have back gardens. The gardens, theirs are a lot, you know, some of their extremes of temperature make it harder to keep pretty flowers in. So they tend to have plainer gardens quite often. So maybe their soil is less fertile. Personally, I use Targrout because it's much more controllable and it's the right colour. And taupe is my favourite colour from Larson. I'm using it a lot. But you can get browns, you can do custom mixes. I've used it for beach sand. Though Green Stuff Well sent me some beach sand stuff, so I probably won't use it on this one, but I did a diorama a couple of years ago now on a beach. So, and I used it for that mixed with sand. So, you know, I use Targrout for everything rather than soil, just because it's consistent. I just bought a 10 kilo bag of that because it was cheaper than the 3 kilo bag. So yeah, Targrout instead of soil. That's my recommendation. Off to make Mary's tea back soon. Enjoy, Stephen. How's Roro getting on? People keep asking me. Nothing happens on it. It just doesn't have time. So I can either do YouTube videos. or I can do railroad and not put anything on YouTube, because it's not YouTubeable. Nothing is at the stage where you can do a complete beginning to end. I did techniques for years and I've got them all out there, but most of it is now at a semi-finished stage. It's, unless I go back over the same techniques again, there's nowhere to go there. And I had a long chat with everybody who does railroading on YouTube, and there are people that have 100,000 or more followers, and they're often very humorous, witty stuff. But actually, if you talk to people who do stuff and make a living out of it, it's not doing railroad stuff on YouTube. So when I came to do this as a living, I thought, what shall I do? And I started a little miniature one that would fit on the worktop better. And I am stuck on that on the track. I'm really stuck. It's 3D, it's a nightmare. We'll not go there tonight. I may do it as the live stream after this one finishes. So after this Dagobah swamp, I may do my Port de Norwich micro layout, because I've all the video from the start and I'm playing it here. So I could easily do it over a couple of live streams where I've got to so far. There's a lot of things I don't like about it, which is why it's not on YouTube or progressing. So I might do that instead. But the one at the loft, just no. There's nothing on there I can do in 3 weeks that's a diorama. There's nothing on there that's really YouTubeable, and that is a part of my income. So I'm just struggling with what to do. It's also too hot for the whole of the summer. It's like 30 degrees up there every day, and I just can't work up there. And I've tried ventilation tiles and stuff, but realistically, I either have to pull it all out and do a proper extension, which I can't afford. And if I pulled it out, I wouldn't build it again. I just know it's too big. It's kind of daunting now. It's just too big. It's been sat there too long. So I'm doing dioramas, which I can finish, suits my attention span at the moment. It's not that they're necessarily in a railroad scale or anything. And I am going to try and make sure I do more scenery ones. So yeah, there we go. So that's the confession on the railroad. It's just stuck. But yeah, if I did Port de Norwich on the live stream, I think that would work quite well, because it's a 4 foot by 2 foot. And once I finish that, I've actually got all the stuff to do a main seaport. So I was thinking main seaport. So maybe some of the live stream stuff is, you know, just suitable for railroad instead, because you can put slightly longer stuff onto here. Okay, is it too cold in the attic now? No, it's fine in the attic at this time of year, because the hatch is always open, so it just stays warm. It's about the same temperature as my upstairs, because the windows are always open up there. So it's not really a problem. I don't like a hot house, which is why I've got a coat and scarf on, sat here with all the computers churning and no heating on. So let's go down, and then I need to start talking again, because I noticed that I've gone on to dupe string. So let's just, I'll come back to you, Mecerno, with the concepts in a sec. So these are some really exciting views of me like cutting string, because this is also going to go on a proper YouTube short video at some point. So there would have been bits where I zoomed in and did here's a cutting a bit of string. But basically, for doing vines, and when you look at the Dagobah swamp photos, these are covered in vines. And for those aerial root things that come off at the bottom, jute string is perfect. I love jute string. I have it in, I mean, you can see I've got a green box of it there. I have it in everything from rope through to fine string. And I take the rope and I hot glue the section, you know, about this long, hot glue the bottom, untwirl it, and you can make a background tree. Not a great tree, but if you want a blobby cotton ball tree and you don't want to do polyfibre, it's another way to do that kind of tree. So I have used it to make trees. It's a bit floppy, the normal stuff. But for this, I'm hot gluing long pieces of it on. And I always hate having my face in shot, because I don't know if I'm talking to myself or if I don't know, but I always seem to be like making weird mouth movements. So yeah, I never really put myself on camera for that reason, in sped up versions. So I cut 4 or 5 pieces, the length of the trees. It doesn't matter if they're too long, I'll trim them in a minute. And I put them on, and I use hot glue. Now, hot glue will blister if you put your finger in it, which I was constantly doing. If you rub it, it spreads it out and it doesn't burn as much. So if you get hot glue on there, maybe counterintuitive, just rub it a bit and you'll stop it burning. And for the next, I don't know, few sped up bits of video, I'm basically covering everything here with 2 or 3 different types of jute string. I haven't put the finest version on yet because I'm probably going to keep that in its native colour, or maybe just stain it a little. But these are just string going on to create vines. And in a minute, we'll start doing macrame with them too. Back to the comments. How do you come up with the concepts for your dioramas? Well, it depends what I'm doing at the time. So I did Gundam because I was watching Gundam. Incidentally, that was my worst video ever, was my 30-minute mission ones. Nobody wanted to watch it. It's still struggling, I think, to break 10k. And I didn't particularly, yeah. Sometimes you make dioramas and they really work, and what you see in your head is what comes out, and it worked well. Other times, somehow they didn't work, and you realise that there were maybe bits you didn't do. So my fun fair one didn't do that well. And in my head, I had it with loads of people and a whole scene. But I actually want to do more later, so I didn't want to start building the base till I had all the pieces. Otherwise it could be a bit piecemeal. But I didn't know what else was going to go on there. So I thought I'll just do the actual fun fair ride rather than all the bit around it. And I think with all the bit around it, it becomes a more accessible diorama. So how do I come up with concepts? I have a huge list. So I have kits of buildings. So I've got loads of HO kits of buildings. I've got, you know, Gundam kits, and there will be some Gundam coming, but I'll talk a bit about the jungle in a sec, about concept. But mostly I just have an idea, or there's a competition. So I did the droid, the samurai droid, because it was a collaboration, and I did the Hulk versus Thor because it was a competition I was taking part in. Just a bit of fun, really. I wasn't wanting to, you know, do it to get awards. I've done that in the past with the NMRA, and, you know, I've got best in show and all that kind of stuff. And it's okay, but it's not what I want. I don't want to compete in this. I'm already overexposed to the kind of competitive aspect with it being on social media and it being on YouTube, and did my video do well? I don't want to do it any more than it already is. So, but they're sometimes great to come up with ideas, and they were almost like, here's the Ragnarok, go build a sort of Gundam or, you know, mecha kit, bash, make up something along with themes of you've been dumped on a scavenger planet and you've got to make up a gladiator sort of mech. So that was basically where that one came from. But if we look at the jungle, so, and this is, I'm actually struggling with concept on this, and that's the interesting one. So I had a Zagok. It's a Gundam. It's a Shah Aznable, and this is all gibberish unless you've watched it. And he has these bright red, he's a bit of a tart really. He always has blonde hair, a mask, and black and gold. He's very like that. And I've watched, you know, 80 plus episodes of this thing. So there's a scene where this particular model of Gundam is in Brazil, and it comes out in an underground cavern, and it, you know, is invading the sort of white base. It wants to get hold of. Yeah, anyway, long story short, it's invading through underground caverns, and it's an amphibious Gundam. So, you know, okay. Yeah, I could do that. I'm just going to take an aside. I tried gluing the jute string at first. This really didn't work. So I didn't do this. So you can see I tried PVAing it. It just wasn't floating my boat, so I stopped. So this is the only one that got PVA'd with these first couple. And then I came back the next day with a different matter. And sometimes you try things, you think, this isn't working. Stop and think about it overnight, and then come back the next day and do something different would be my top tip. So back to the jungle one. So I've got this Zagok. I've kind of built it, because in Gundam they build them, then they take them apart and paint them, and they rebuild them for some reason. It's about balancing it and looking for it and knowing that it all fits, and getting rid of seam lines. You can glue the bits where you can glue them, or put scribe lines down so that the seam lines aren't obvious where the two bits fit. And because Gundam are made by Bandai and they're all snap fit, they also do it for Star Wars, I believe. You don't glue anything. They're the most beautiful plastic kits you'll put together. The engineering's lovely. They're just great kits. They spoil you because everything snaps. And, you know, these ones have a frame that's a movable frame that's printed in one go. So basically you snap it off the sprue and you can bend the knee, and he will do a full kneeling pose. So he'll get his leg up. So I originally had this vision. He was coming in an underground cavern, knee up, and shooting. But then my Hulk and Thor video tanked really badly. Like, nobody watched it. none of my subscribers watched it, so YouTube don't show it. Nobody else. It had an awful click-through rate. So I'm like, okay. So I'm not known for just doing plastic kits, and there wasn't enough scenery on that. And there wasn't enough scenery on my funfair one. I need to do more scenery. So Diorama Precipe got in touch at the time and said, we'd like to send you some stuff. So I was like, great. Let's do a jungle, because I'd like to do a jungle. I like doing jungles. A lot of vegetation, jungle and waterfall. And I had 2 things I can do with that, but all of the Diorama Precipe scale stuff is about 1:35. And this Zagok is 1:144. So either I put it in out of scale, it's not a Gundam, and it's just like a mecha kit, mecha thing. It's just like, what do I do? So at the moment I've got several ideas. I've got a waterfall and a jungle in my head. That's a concept. I could put the Zagok behind the waterfall, peering through. I could put it in the trees, lurking, peering through. I could put it on the side and have small people diving off it. But because the vegetation's too large, that probably won't work. Or I could just say that Zagok's not going on the jungle diorama, and the Zagok will go on a different one. And actually, I could go for a 1:35, really tall waterfall with jungle around it. And I want to do Tomb Raider hanging. There's a bit in the first of the reboot Tomb Raiders where you go down a river and you have to jump out of it. And in the film, she jumps out onto a plane wing that's rotting away. So I could do a rotting away plane wing, not rusting, because obviously you don't have iron in planes, but rotting away plane wing, and a person, Lara, hanging off. And then a very tall vertical. But you have to be 1:35, but you'd actually see Lara then. And that might be what I do. So concept is fluid until I start the diorama. Maybe I just saw a great video and I thought, I'd like to try that technique. No, it's the same. I'm not going to copy it, but I really liked that concept of an explosion, water, whatever it is. Sometimes it's just I've seen a great scene on a campaign trailer. So the Halo ones are all campaign trailer driven and then expanded on it. It's just what I've watched on TV. It's games I've played. It's exhibitions I've been to in model railways I've seen. It's whatever is in train at the time. And then 6 months later, I actually build it. So quite often the original inspirations changed a lot. So Pirates of the Caribbean was because someone from the Patreon who stayed a month and said I didn't do what she wanted. Someone from Patreon came and said, I'd like you to do a beach scene with rocks, sea and grass, please. I was like, okay, I can do that. And then she left almost straight away. And the leaving comment was that the creator didn't do what she wanted. It's like, you asked for a complete diorama, and I said, yeah, but it's in the queue. It's still in the queue. It's the one coming up next, and it's morphed into Pirates of the Caribbean because it's a great concept. So that's concept. Very wordy amount on concept. I better go and see what, Dirt and do a gravel drive, perfect material. If you've got a gravel drive, I can imagine it would be. Yeah, so someone's got a voting for the Anycubic X and love it for N scale and 28 to 35 mil terrain. People occasionally send out free printers. The people who get in touch with me, Anycubic always try and send me their latest filament. I'm not a filament person, so I just kind of tell them that I'm not interested. I would like a laser cutter if anybody wants to give me a free one of those. So Norm said baseball diamond dirt would probably be clay based. I think it is, which makes it very good because it isn't going to shrink. It's quite solid when it's glued. On the topic of tile grout, have you ever used tile adhesive for anything? Just wondering if it could be used. I haven't, but I can imagine. We were talking earlier about acrylic frame sealant. I can imagine if it's a cement based one, it's just a plaster. If it's a gluey based one, it could just be used as a glue or a filler or something like that, I guess. I've not really tried it. I don't think I have any bags of it around, which is where my experiments come from quite often. Hi, Den My Fries. Is that sisal or jute string? It's sisal. Sorry, it's jute. It's jute string. I just put it all off Amazon at various times, or got it from the National Trust garden section by the look of one of the tins. So I've got a couple in tins. I've got all the different sizes. You need a really thin one and a really thick one. And you can see here, I've got something that's probably, I don't know, maybe 8 mil 5 to 8 mil across, and I've got something else that's probably only 2 or 3 mil across. And at the moment, all I'm doing is hot gluing loads and loads of it to the top so I can wrap it in a bit. Question answered. Would you ever do video game dioramas like Uncharted, Last of Us, Bioshock, Doom? I have got Tomb Raider ones out there, and I've got Halo ones out there, so definitely a yes, and I've already done them. Just go check out the video channel and you'll see I've got a Halo one already done this year and 2 more coming out on the run up to Halo Infinite. And then, you know, they're big. I mean, my Halo Warthog is about this size. It's a nightmare actually because it's so heavy, and it's in midair. But I'm in love with the explosion. It was wonderful. I've never done an explosion before. I'm so in love with it. This is just, yeah, it's probably my favourite diorama of the year. Last year I've done a couple of Tomb Raider ones. I did Underwater earlier this year, and I did Tomb of Lava last year. So I think she's due another tomb, but I think the Waterfall Jungle one will be the next one for Lara, because that's been on the list for yonks. Then I need to work out what I'm going to do with my Zagok. He is an underwater amphibious, but I don't really want to encase him in resin, so I wondered about just putting him in a kind of aquarium box and just painting like a dome. I don't know, still thinking about it. Oh yeah, and Jaw said she recently did a brilliant Lara Croft Tomb Raider one. Thank you, definitely worth looking. Yep, and I did do a great Halo one. True, I should read down my comments more. Yeah, the thing about the Halo one, which was really good, it's just Northwest scenery, you know, Northwest North America scenery. So it's all based on the Pacific Northwest. It's beautiful scenery with silver hexagons now, but it is just beautiful scenery. So my Halo mongoose, I mean the mongoose is this kind of size, it's splashing through a stream because I've always wanted to do a splash stream. You could do the same sort of thing in any scale, it's just a lot smaller. So the beauty of these dioramas is I don't have to do the main model because they're toys, which just saves quite a bit of time. And you know, I did the base for it with I haven't put the grass on yet, but I did all of the base in just like almost a day. It didn't take long. So probably 2 days by the time I'd let something dry in between. It was just a day actually, just a day. And then I did the water splash the second day. So it doesn't take long to do some of this basic scenery. It's just really good to do every now and then. Yeah. Made Mary drink. Oh, bless. I'm not a fan of Horlicks, but the little drop of brandy sounds good. I'll take a swig myself. When separating twine, try bundling the rope, then take a pet coarse hairbrush. Then relax combing the twine to unfurled fibres. Now glue the vines to your layout. Well, that's interesting. I undid them a bit at the bottom, but actually I didn't do it that much. I have done it for trees and things, but for this I just went to a thinner twine because I decided to macrame them. So you can see at the beginning I tried unwinding them and I tried gluing them, you know, and at the moment I'm stringing like a jungle gym across the corner so that I had something to hang the vines on where there's no trees, but there's still vines in the video. So there's just jungle, and there could almost be branches at this sort of scale as well. That really thick, it's not my thickest rope, but it's certainly a good chunky jute rope. Bullocks and brandy. I have a free laser cutter too if anyone's giving them away. I think we'd all like that. Kathy, it should be noted that no matter the diorama genre, the techniques shared can easily be used by railway, gaming, sci-fi, military modelling, even doll housing. I think that's very true, and I'm a big advocate of that, and I've learnt so many of my techniques from other branches of modelling. So when I was doing railways, I looked at a lot of military modelling, especially for weathering and their attention to detail, and I just loved that side of it, and I love the fine scale side of railway modelling. And then, I mean, I've always done a lot of sci-fi, but it just didn't go out as much. So I put too much on my channel recently, I know, because I wasn't sure what to do on my railway. The one up the loft isn't really videoable, and I'm just stalled on Port de Norwich. So, and I have a lot of sci-fi boxes and stuff around. But if I look around this room, which is my earlier dioramas, I've got a Transformers, Bumblebee and Optimus Prime. I've got an O-scale Bordello, that was fun. I've got a Machine and Krieger sort of hanging off frosty because I wanted to try snow and ice. My ice went yellow. I used epoxy glue, goes yellow. Well, I've got a Kino, which is a military. It was by Foscale, and he did a 1/35 scale. You can still get them on his website, I think. Kino, so it's like a cinema. So I did that as a ruined building. Beautiful kit. They were lovely kits. So much fun to do. And I've got my first ever diorama, which is my house in the UK. I was at the row of terraces, so it was 2 rows of terraces, and that went to the NMRA. It was supposed to be on my first UK layout, but that didn't last very long. And then I've got a swamp module. I binned most of them, but that's one bit of it with a building and a like pile driven. It's not trestles, it's pile driven track. I'm not sure it will ever get done, but we'll see. I've got Transformers Bone Crusher. He's a minesweeping vehicle with a giant spade. So I scratch built the giant spade and he's flipping a car. I've got a Halo tree. I've got ON30 camp cars from my old logging layout. I've got rid of the layout but kept the rolling stock. And I've got a striker I made. And actually down there I've got a few just bought toys of Halo pelicans and warthogs and things. Warthog I made up, but the pelican just came. They were like clipped together really simple kits that they brought out a couple of years ago. So I've got a lot of sci-fi in this room, and then my railroad was always upstairs, but that's the one that's stalled at the moment. But one thing I notice this with people looking around shows. It's human nature to look for what you want, and I will see, and I've got friends that will do it. They go past and go, "Let's go," and walk on. I'm like, you can learn something from every layout. It may not be that the scenery looks amazing, but there may be something else you can take away on the way the control system works, the way they've set it up. Quite often people have different skills and they'll be different to yours. So I always like layouts of really stunning scenery because I like scenery. But I can chat to any owner and find a learning point from their layout on how perhaps they did the quick breakdown at the end so they can get out that show really quickly if it's an exhibition, how they've just anything from DCC sound. And often the people that are into different things to you will have a layout that maybe doesn't have great scenery because they're not into scenery, but has great other stuff that you're not so interested in, but it's actually you need to know and learn. So I love looking around, just chatting to people, and I think you can learn from anything, and it is a big learning game. But I've learned a lot from military, I've learned a lot from sci-fi. I've looked at a lot of Gundam recently, and they do it a completely different way, and their videos are so into ASMR, which is all like they clip it off the nub for 20 minutes of a video. I'm just like, that's the most boring part, surely. But anyway, they have a completely different style of video. Terrain has some awesome stuff, Real Terrain Hobbies does some really great massive dioramas for, I don't know if you play on them particularly or if he just has them. He did a whole medieval village and town. It was a big castle, absolutely stunning, beautiful work. And I'd love to do a medieval buildings, if not a medieval town, because you can do a Cotswold village in the UK and it's got loads of medieval buildings in it. So you can do the half timbered without having to do old scenes. In fact, I'd like to do a Cotswold village at some point for a completely different reason that at some point I'll tell everyone about, but at the moment is sort of a back project. But yeah, just really, really important to look at the way other people do it. So if I want to do an explosion for Halo, it's not a model railroad thing. So you have to go look somewhere else. And I start generally now on YouTube. But back in the day, it would have been forums, avidly read all the forums, Railroad Line, all those sorts of ones. It would have been magazines. I've got all the weathering magazines early on. Loads of Narragansett Short Line Gazette, which I want to get rid of because I'm running out of space. Loads of Model Railroader. Just learn techniques. And the techniques work in almost any scale. Yes, they're harder in end scale. But yeah, they still can work if you're very dedicated. Right. I feel like you would love Bioshock Underwater Art Deco Steampunk Uncharted 3 the plane scene. I think I have Bioshock bought but I haven't played it. I go through phases of watching video games or playing video games, and I did all the Tomb Raiders, I've done all the Halos, and I've done about 4 or 5 other games. I've just done all the Mass Effect, And people who complain about Mass Effect Andromeda, I'm like, you obviously haven't played Mass Effect 1 recently, because this is as good as Mass Effect 1, which is tediously boring, and every single planet looks exactly the same when you're doing the side missions. So I'm actually quite enjoying just sitting there and running around, picking up hidden caches. On Lara Croft, I literally found every single item. I have 100% completion, which meant I found every single bit of buried this, that, or the other. I've jumped every single unjumpable ledge to go get something. And I just spent an hour this afternoon running around trying to find the hidden cache, which turned out to be on the very top level, which I'd already looked there and found it, and it was like, oh, and I fell off and found it, and I was like, there it is. So, you know, I like that aspect of games. If it gets too hard on the shooting and I've died for like an hour, I just put it on easy and go through, because I am not there to kill things. I am there to kind of play a game that's immersive. That's why I like campaigns. But it's a hobby which I've picked up more and more as this is my other hobby, modelling, has become my job, because, you know, this is my job. That's the trouble. I need a break from it, and that's what I'm doing. So Mass Effect Andromeda, I'm trying to get finished, which isn't easy on a 60-hour campaign. Trying to get it finished before Halo in December, because Halo will trump it. I think that's going to be open world as well, so it should be great. I burned my little finger gunning a diorama today. Not as good as yours. Oh, I wouldn't say that, Vez. And yeah, I have a few blisters from the hot glue. They are not, yeah, it's not great, but I love hot glue. I use it a lot. It's really great. And then someone in a comment had said to me, just a comment on my YouTube, oh, you can get hot glue off easily by adding isopropyl alcohol. So I've discovered if you put isopropyl alcohol on the glue, it will just release from whatever it's against, which makes it absolutely brilliant for doing dams and things like that I've been putting off, because it's hard to get. It's actually really easy to get off as well. Yellow ice. I was warned about that as a kid. It did start out clear, I promise you. But I did it on fishing lines, so it was actually all bent as well, because the fishing line's quite bent. I would do a different way. I tried pulling sprues, but it just didn't work for me. But, I mean, on the video, still putting on jute string. Where was I? I used the mortar and plaster of Paris to make my own sculptor mould with cellulose blown in insulation. I produce a rock hard surface. I've not tried it. I just bought a bag of sculptor mould recently because it was easier. But my worry about rock hard is I actually like my base layers to be soft enough to carve if you get it wrong. So I want it to be a little bit softer, so that when I need to change something, I can chisel it out with just a box cutter. So it's just one of my aims. In sculptor moulds, a little bit softer than plaster. So I guess it's about using the right plaster, isn't it? Stephen has always had a thing about busy, cluttered workshops, aircraft hangars, loco sheds, garages. I think it would make awesome diorama. One of my first dioramas, which I no longer have, was a garage diorama. It's just a standard diorama. And I did full interiors for like a general store, a little car interior, and then a big workshop out back, big barn workshop, all from scratch, apart from I used a kit for the general store, but bashed it around. I cut bits off and moved them. And then I used 3 plaster walls someone had given me from a Thomas York kit for the car bit. Everything else was scratch built, and it was O-scale. And you probably see photos on my website, but that was my very first diorama I did. And it's before I even had an electrostatic applicator for the grass. I just blew it on with a puffer bottle. And I used a lot of grass mat at the time, Gauge Mass, to have a brownish dead grass mat, so I used that as well. And the guy said, he opened it up and it lit, you know, it had lights and everything. He opened it up and discovered all this stuff in some of the outhouses, and he like took it out and moved it elsewhere because it just had so many bits in it. And he actually made it into a ON30 module, because it had been like a car garage and it didn't have any trains on. And I used a rotten wood with wood worm and holes and stuff round the outside as a frame, so it looked really good. Tile grout on that, I'm sure. Definitely tile grout on that. One of my earliest ones is probably early 2010s or something. So yeah, I love garages. They are so much fun. Just all that clutter, you know, cutting up bits of styrene, getting pictures off the internet of cans, tins, cutting them out and wrapping individual pieces of cut up styrene rod to make tins. That's what I did. It was brilliant. Loved it. Oh, those were the days. Talking about 6 months. Ian says he always tries to learn from shows and agree about the other hobbies for learning other skills. I went to IPMS up in Telford, which is the International Plastic Modelers Society, and I found it quite disappointing because they were judging, so it was hard to get in to see the dioramas. Compared, and I found this with a lot of exhibitions I've been to at the NEC of other hobbies, model railways, you're spoilt by the amount you get to see because everybody has huge numbers of great layouts. And you go, I went to Destination Star Trek, and it's like you meet cast members and there's like a little museum sort of an exhibition or something. But compared to a train show, it's all sitting and listening to talks and things. Whereas going around a train show is really visual. You look at a lot of stuff. It was quite interesting. I was like, okay, I've been around the hall now, and it's just, if I don't go to the talk that's on at the moment, what do I do apart from queue for an autograph, which costs money? So I found it really fascinating, the difference. And model railways, compared to almost everything else, just have far more square footage of stuff to look at. So it is a really great bang for your buck exhibition. I think the medieval town was shipped out to the company that provided the buildings a display table for them to take to shows. Oh, that'd be great, Tamsin, if they did do that. So this is talking about the Real Terrain Hobbies. I mentioned it earlier, big medieval board. It was massive. It was like 20 foot long. Probably wasn't that big, but it seemed like it. And they'd given him all of the resin kits, this company, and the beautiful kits, you know, terrain worthy kits. So the really solid, beautiful resin, and much cheaper than trying to 3D print that kind of thing yourself. And they'd give him like $2,500 worth, that might be Canadian, dollars worth of kits. And, you know, he got, Ubertown went and painted them. So anyway, I wouldn't be surprised if they got them back, because what do you do with it? The fun's in the building and putting it on YouTube, but you then get stuck with something that's so big, nowhere to put it. You're going to look like a hairdresser with the twine. Felt like this, and I felt like my hair, you can just see it in the corner, just looks like jute string, doesn't it? It really does. Yeah, it's not a great... Anyway. Have you ever been to Pendon to learn new skills? I have been to Pendon, Ian. One of my friends is a trustee there, and it's brilliant. They use plumber's hemp for their thatch, and I bought some there, and I've used it to make bushes. I think they do some amazing work. Stunningly beautiful modelling. Look it up online, Pendon. It's the Vale of Wiltshire, and they have some beautiful English modelling, plus some original Vale scenes and very well-known models from back in the day. Have you ever a Jurassic Park themed diorama? Oh, Daniel will be happy. I have one printed out ready to go in about 4 dioramas time. I'm doing the iconic, so Gambody have the iconic 3D print T-Rex with the car flipped upside down from the first one, where they've just fed him the go. He's come through the fence and the kids are under them in the mud under it. I did a rainy day model diorama a couple of years ago, and I did it in the rain in Photoshop because I couldn't get it to work, and some people poo-pooed it. Some people came up with loads of great ideas, and I want to put the rain on the scene. So it's not going to be just that scene. It's going to have that blue cast rain feel to it as well. So I need to work out how I'm going to do that, but it's all printed ready to go. And it may be that the diorama, it just goes around the outside in a circle or something. It may be that I have the Jurassic Park uprights with a gate looking in as a frame. I don't know, still thinking about that, but I've definitely printed the T-Rex, and it's this kind of size. I think the Jeep's about that big. So it's quite chunky. It's going to look great. Gambody do some great, I'm not affiliated or anything, but they do some great models that I like to use. And this one just looked awesome. So it's printed. It's definitely happening. The only game I 100% did was Batman Arkham Knight, collecting over 400 Tiddler trophies and riddles. I actually sometimes play them. I played Titanfall 2, and then I went back and did all the pilot helmets on a second playthrough. But for Tomb Raider, you can go back through everywhere because they have fast travel to camps, so it's quite easy to go back after the game and pick stuff up. So yeah, it's the completionist OCD person in me. And if you don't play video games and you're wondering what I mean, just be grateful. It takes a lot of time to get to 100%. JV Nam says it would be a hoot to build the same high street and side alley ways 3 ways, Elizabethan, Jacobean and Victorian. I'm involved with something that may be doing that. I'm not doing it myself, but I'm involved in something which I will be showing probably on my channel if it comes off, that will be doing something very similar to that concept. So it's a great one. It'll be parts of London through the eras, starting with dinosaurs perhaps, we'll see. But yeah, I think that would be great. It would be a beautiful model. The trouble is, if you're in somewhere that's got grade 2 listing, they won't have changed that much. But yeah, the people would change, definitely. Hi, Celtic Bard, welcome to us. Dino's seconded. Yeah, I was looking at the T-Rex and I almost did it with Tomb Raider because she has them. But it's a very blocky Tomb Raider. So it was one of the earliest. Was it 2 they were in? They're in one of the early scenes of 2. So I decided that I would go and do the proper classic Jurassic Park because it just had its 20th anniversary or 15th anniversary or something. It was just quite recent. I was at Salute at Excel yesterday. There were some great game scenics. I don't know what Salute is, Ratty. So I'm guessing it's terrain if you're saying there's some great game scenics there. But yeah, I love watching terrain videos. You know, Black Magic Craft, Real Terrain Hobbies, Geek Gaming. They do some great stuff. And it's a larger scale that you can actually see it. The only thing I don't like on terrain are the really chunky dwarven sort of proportions. I like my modelling, because I come from a railroad background probably, I like it to be really fine scale and quite spindly. So sometimes I look at the trains and what I would do is if it's a 3D print one, I'd print maybe the roof and maybe the walls, but then do the balustrade, you know, the banisters and stuff myself or something like that because I just want them a bit finer. But I love terrain stuff. It's just so great. They do some great modelling. I don't know Pavlov's house game, but I'm going to look for it after this. That was Ratty Rex. That was good. Right, I don't even know what a Squiddo hat is, but apparently people in chat went to Salute and they had Squiddo hats. Interesting. It's a tabletop war game show, biggest in the UK. Oh, okay. I've done a couple of things in wargaming scales. Traveller was my last one, which was aimed, I did it at 15mm, but it was aimed at 28mm. And it's just, if you want to put it in a diorama, sometimes it gets quite big. And think back to the Real Terrain Hobbies one that was so massive. So I tend to stick to slightly smaller scales just because I can fit more in. And I like scenery. Scenery needs space. Okay. H.G. Wells' The Time Machine in Different Eras, Stephen, is another great concept. If people like architectural modelling, and it is almost its own little brand, then you can do some great stuff with it. And especially nowadays, if you could CAD design and then laser cut or brother scan and cut, cry cut, whatever you do, some of the base pieces so they're identical, it'd be very easy to get the same scene 3 or 4 times. You could scratch build it, but I can never cut that accurately. So just talking about Dagobah, yeah, it's still getting hairy. It goes on a long time, this, which is why I thought we'd talk about trees. So the other thing I said we'd talk about was tools and materials. So let me just... You know, I'm writing an ebook at the moment. I wrote a book that we talked about earlier that's coming out, a hard... it's a softback, you know, book. 192 pages, and I couldn't do the ebook at the same time because the content was becoming too similar, which isn't fair on Comback. And I wanted the ebook to have more video content and to be more interactive. So I've started that up, and I took the first set of photos a week or so ago and I was editing them yesterday, the day before. And one of the things that I talk about in all the books is basic tools and materials. It's a big question I get asked by people. I'm tutoring some people on Patreon, and it's a big question for people. What do I need? So I thought I would just talk about the basic tools. First up, and I'd love to hear what people think are their favourite tools. Put it in the chat if you have something you can't live without. But I would say for me, the basic tools are knife, ruler, cutting mat, and, you know, that's what you need to start. And then weights and squares to hold things down, to get things level. Going on through to disposable cups for mixing things, coffee stirrers, you know, all that kind of stuff for mixing stuff. Paint brushes, which I use all the time for scenery as well. And finally, this is tools, not materials. And finally, in that sort of section, there's just tweezers and small pliers and those sort of miniature tools that you might need, and sanding stuff, because you sand quite a bit in my experience. So that was like my basic toolkit. So I'd be intrigued to see what everyone else thinks. Let's see. It'll take them a while to get there on the chat. First though, thanks Ratty. Yeah, the Traveller broke me. It was too much. It was over ambitious. It's actually upstairs. It needs putting out somewhere, but I haven't got any space. It was just, yeah, it was good. Miniature Wonderland did a set of dioramas, same location over the years, ending in the fall of Checkpoint Charlie. I've heard of that, Ian. I think that's the inspiration for the one I was talking about. And it's Hamburg through the ages, yeah. If I was doing something, I think London based, it'd be 2012. Maybe Olympics might be the last one. Or Millennium for the fireworks, because you've got to make it exciting, haven't you? But Miniature Wonderland definitely has a lot of amazing stuff in there. Okay, so we've got a little chat about the time machine. Oh, and we've gone into War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds is, yeah, it's definitely one that's I've seen some great concept art for that would be really, really good. And I've read the original H.G. Wells. I do remember reading those as a kid. So yeah. So everyone wants the Jeff Wayne album. Hi, I just did a TTG Hobbit hole that was cool too. Yeah. Hi, I did a Hobbit hole, and actually Real Train Hobbies just did some Hobbit holes. There's quite a lot of Hobbit holes out there. So there really are, you know, it's that green rolling hills of England, isn't it? Sort of transplanted to New Zealand. So they're another great one that I thought, oh, I'll do that, because North of the Border had done one recently. And then everyone else did them, so I was like, no, that's off the list for now. Yeah. So grandchildren asked what I was making for dinner. I answered reservations. So off we go. Oh, JV Namb. In that case, have fun, and we'll speak soon. Next one, I guess. So Mark is coming up with his basic tools. Cloths to wipe up any awkward spills. Yeah, I have kitchen roll on the side. Actually, it's on my basic toolkit part 2, kitchen roll, along with things like micro brushes and cotton buds and cocktail sticks, which I used to put glue on, but I use a lot, and bamboo skewers and coffee stirrers, you know, all that kind of thing. And actually, the one I missed out my basic toolkit is protective equipment. So I always get people saying you should be wearing a mask. Sometimes halfway through a job, I think, why haven't I got a mask on? Why haven't I got gloves on? Because this is really manky and I should have done it. And so it should be better. I should be better at it. If it's going to be fumy, I'll always have a mask on. But if it's going to be dusty, I don't always think about it. And foam and some of the snows, one of the snows really sets me off, coughing all the time. So I do recommend that you get mask, gloves and proper goggle eye protection, because Dremels will put stuff up underneath. But back to the video, we've got paint going on. Now, first up, I had this as a custom mixed emulsion. I think North America calls it latex paint. I don't know what the rest of the world calls it, but it's emulsion paint. So it's a water-based paint. It's a decorating paint. I had it custom mixed for a layout and then never used it. So I've got quite a lot there, and I used half to 2/3 of this tin on this diorama. It's got a couple of coats, and I've still got spots I missed, which is fine. I could have sprayed it, but it would take so long to spray this area, and getting the airbrush in would have been a pain. So I just used a little brush. Now this is great for 2 reasons. I mentioned half an hour or so ago that I tried PVA glue and I just wasn't feeling it. So I've knitted all this stuff back and forth. It's all macrameed at this point, and I probably didn't comment on that, but there was a lot of knitting it all back and forth, so it's wound around the trunks. So it looks like it's growing up the trunks, but it's really not set. It's all very floppy still. Now this emulsion goes into the jute string and just sets it solid. These are now really solid. So I've got them over here, you know, I press that and it's rock solid. I mean, obviously it's jute string, so it's not like rock solid, but it's really solid. So it's a great way of, instead of using glue, you can use paint to set some softer materials into a more solid sort of way. And certainly emulsion is really, really great because it's cheap. You can get it in a range of colours, even custom mixed. It's still cheap. You can buy huge amounts of it. I have a black masonry paint mat, which I use for all my diorama bases. And I've probably got another spare tin up the top. It's just B&Q black masonry paint for exterior mat. And it's great. And I use it all the time for anything that needs black paint. And I'm still on my first big one. And I've done a layout, all the fascias and pelmets and valances and stuff. And loads of dioramas. And they're just so useful. So it's definitely worth getting a blue for sky, custom mix, because you can never find a decent blue in the sort of ones you want to put on the wall. In just a fairly cheap, thin, you don't need it to be too thick, basic paint. And I have an earth. I would probably buy an earth one, but I tend to use raw umber acrylic paint. But it's also very good for earth colours. You can get a custom mix earth to what you want. And then it will always be around and you can use it. So here I am painting all of these trees and vines and trying to get it in all the way. Now it is a pain to get around the roots, and I said right at the beginning I debated whether I should do it before the vines, and I decided not to. I don't know why. I don't know why I decided to do it later. Maybe I was just in a rush and wanted to get on with the vines. It wasn't the best decision, and I tried to paint the foil on the back because there isn't paper mache around the back on all of them, so that when I put the backdrop up against it, I'm not getting light scatter from the foil reflecting onto it. Just a worry. But yeah, so you're going to watch me do this for a while now. So back to the chat and basic tools. Files and side snips for me. 4 side snips, each for different materials. I don't have that many side snips, but do you mean side cut nippers? Because I have those. So yeah, I have side cut nippers. I have a pair just for like thick wire that are DIY ones. I have a miniature pair that are quite worn that I use for thinner wire. And then I use scissors a lot for things. And then I have a pair of sprue cutters that came with a 3D printer. And then I have a very expensive pair of Despy nippers that I use for plastic kits, cutting them absolutely smooth and flat, so when the nubs come off you don't really need to sand as much. So yeah, I have 4 pairs as well. Very important. And you don't want to use your really, really expensive good ones on anything else. That's what they stay for and that's it. Mary's exactly 5 feet tall. She got suspicious when I was always photographing her beside railway buildings. Yeah, I can see that. You could just take a giant ruler, but a wife is less, or partner is less obvious. My mum's 5.5 foot. That ½ inch just. Oof. And what happens if she wears heels? Does that throw off your measurements? I mean, I won't tell you the amount of times I've counted bricks. I've just counted so many bricks to try and get building sizes. Brick counting, that's my tip. Tamsin, Pavel's house was a famous battle zone in Stalingrad. I did catch it, but I didn't realise that. So Pavel's house, so we're talking about the games from Salute in Excel, and he said Pavel's house was a famous battleground zone in Stalingrad. Right, I had missed that, yeah, thanks. So yeah, great, some of those make great terrain, and you can do World War II as a railroad. They did the trenches for, which is actually World War One, but they did the trenches on Great Model Railway Challenge. Beautiful layout by those guys. Really, really good. Railroad Video Division. Great layout. Hot wire cutters for foam. See, I didn't put that on either of mine, partly because I'm using so much PIR foam at the moment, which is the Celotex in the UK. It's the aluminium foil covered one that's quite powdery, and you can't use them on that. And what I bought recently was a Proxon foam cutter, and I buy the expensive foam and use that on some things, but the foam cutter has been really useful for getting straight cuts and more like that. And that's inspired by people like Black Magic Craft, who's a terrain person. You see it a lot in terrain. Never really seen it much in model railways before, that kind of cutting up of foam. But because I'm using the PIR, I don't think of the hot wire cutter immediately, because it just isn't useful at the moment. And I've started to cut a lot more with just a box cutter because I'm not carving them. So I carved my PIR foam with a box cutter and brass knife, brass brush. Wasn't very impressed. Covered it all in tar grout, as you do. So too with cocktail sticks. I use so many of them. I'm always finishing them off. Should probably stop buying them from M&S. Yeah, I bought a really cheap 100, 200 pack and I just go through them all the time. I use them for everything, and cotton buds, yeah, you don't put them in your ears, you use them for mopping stuff up. But cocktail sticks I use to put on small dabs of glue, basically. And I've gone to post-it notes because I've run out of train tickets. Post-it note, put the glue out and put a small dab on. It's easiest to control. Never put anything out the tube unless it's a really big bit of glue you're doing, because it can splurge all over your stuff. Right, so Ratty says, my dad used to put paint in the water when making paper mache scenery for his layout. Helps with base paint, he reckoned. I can believe that. I didn't paint these because, you know, I'd put PVA glue in, and I think paint has a lot of good properties. Sometimes I will mix in brown, like acrylic, artist acrylic, raw umber into sculptor mould. Most of the time I just paint it on afterwards because I can't be bothered. But if it's an area you think might get chipped, certainly an exhibition layout, it helps if it's going to chip through to brown rather than to white. Look at that, great paint technique there. Painting foils are a nightmare. You did get a couple of coats. Yeah, I use DIY stuff all the time. Partly because it's in the house, you know, you've got it sat there, wallpaper paste, you know, you think, how can I use this? Polyfiller, how can I use this? I've got it all sat there. Some of it successfully, some of it less successfully. The other thing that I use is sometimes garden centres type builder merchants. So sand, I use sand in all my tar grout too, because most of the tar grout we buy in the UK is unsanded, and it just helps the glue to flow better and gets a better texture if you add some sand. But the other thing I use, obviously, is, so how can I put this? It was slate dust chippings. It was like really small, and it's great for if you're doing a slate quarry. And I've got a bag that's the size of, you know, yay big. It's going to do me the rest of my life. And I've sieved it all the way down to a fine powder for slate, up to, I think the biggest piece is about this big. So it's not too big. And that's very, I think they call it slate dust or something. It's sold in a garden centre. Just picked a bag up. So there's loads of great stuff you can get in garden centres as well, in this sort of soil. Vermiculite's another one you can mix into stuff. It's a enhancer of like soil by adding extra air into it, fluffs it out a bit, and it can do the same. It takes weight out if you do vermiculite. It's another good one to add into some ground goopy mixes. Yeah, side cut nippers, Ratty. Yeah, I thought that's what you meant. That's cool. B&Q is a nice dark earth colour. Bogota in the Good Home paint range. That's good to know. Good colours. Sometimes the dark earths are hard to find. You can always custom mix them though. If you can find one, just take a photo in with the colour you want on. I think I need, yeah, timber. I probably do need 36 inch, 24 inch and 12 inch steel rules. I've only got 12 inch, and I'm just, yeah, something to buy next time I want to buy something on Amazon. I wear trainers. Yes. Stephen says she wears trainers. Not quite sure what that's reacting to. Hi, Fred's Wilbury Castle Railway. Welcome to the live stream. Is the lattice supports on the 3D print suitable to use as girders in models? People keep asking me that, and I did put some on one side for someone to like tidy them up by mistake and put them in the bin. They are, but they're very random. I would actually just, because girders are either square or triangular normally. If I wanted them, I'd just print them myself, properly designed and to the right size. But I'm sure you could use them somewhere. And the trouble is, when you 3D print, you have so many of them, they just go in the bin. Kathy's painting the base. Trees look great. Thank you, Norm. And it does. I don't actually like this green. When it dries, it's a bit. So in life, there's two sets of colours really. They're the mineral colours and the natural colours, the organic colours. And then there's the artificial colours. And this looks like a very artificial green. But it's the base coat. It's mainly to take the white off and to get the vines to the same colour. So I haven't got any further than this base coat with it. So what I'm going to do next is layers and layers of brown over it, and that'll be painting it, because it goes into the soil and it goes into the water at that point. So painting it will be the next stage, and probably the whole of the next, it'll probably take a couple of days, the whole of the next live stream when we get there. We'll be talking about painting, but we talk about basic painting techniques as well while we were at it. Norm's got a great imagination. He says he can sense the mist and fog. So Fred Wilbury, Castle Railway, says, hi Kathy, I sieved the bit from a bag of granite. Gives a great concrete mix with grout. Yeah, you just so many things you can find that you may need to sieve. So you can go out and get dead leaves, whiz them up in a kitchen blender. I have a special one. Sieve it, great ground cover. There's so much you can whiz, you know, everything from peat, moss you can get, so many different things you can whiz up in a blender to reduce it in size. Bark's another one you can whiz, and I've got cups of them, like plastic cups and containers and boxes of all kind of mushed up natural materials, and the very fine stuff is like a flour, all the way through to quite bitty coarse stuff that goes on top. So when you're doing a forest, that's perfect. Hello humanoids, I'm here to see what's going on. Hi Sage Scarlet Wing. We are, I don't know, what time is it? We are nearly at the end. There's 4 minutes to go. So this has actually got 1 minute 56 left of video. So I'm sorry, you're kind of near the end. I tend to use plastic girders on buildings and bridges. I guess it just gets expensive sometimes. I've looked at the price of it and thought, I wonder if I could 3D print that. Having a Burlington Northern boxcar colour scanned at a paint centre was rather interesting. Yeah, because I can imagine that depending which bit of it you've scanned and whether the photo was exposed and colour corrected, you can get quite different results. This green looked very different when I gave it them, and somehow the scan came out, I don't know, just, yeah, like that. Isn't great. So Celtic Bard's favourite modelling tool is space. I need the space to build stuff. I found that some of my dioramas get a bit big. Traveller was that. It went off the mat and then I got super glue on my granite and pulled the top surface of my granite off because it was too big. So yeah, space is definitely important. How do you decide what dioramas to build and where do you get your inspiration from? Bugger lugs. I actually did quite a lot earlier on that. So if you go back about an hour, I did a whole section on where I get my concepts from and whatever, but basically whatever I've been watching or building probably 6 months ago, because that's how long it takes me to actually get them into the build as opposed to the design. I love designing far more than building. 5 kilogram grout is $20. 5 colours, $100. Speaking of expensive, laser gadgets. Yeah, I have smaller colours. What you find is the darker ones you mix into the lighter ones. So what I had is just loads of bags that were left over from years ago because the bags last forever. So I just bought 10 kilos of taupe for 20 quid, I think, delivered on Amazon. Delivered. The guy looked really quite huffy when he moved it. Oh, and there we go. We've finished. So yes, it can be, but I've used that colour on almost everything now. It's the main colour I use. So I would say you only really need one bag and 10 kilos. And I would say you probably, actually, for even a big layout, you probably only need about 5 kilos. I just bought the 10 because it was cheaper. But if you buy black and you mix it in, or you buy a dark brown and mix it in, they're too dark for most scenes. You actually want a lighter soil colour. So you can just mix those dark colours into a lighter one to get a more balanced colour mix. So, video's done, yes. Sorry, I hadn't noticed. Right, Stephen's back on night shift tomorrow. Have a great night shift. And we're going to be finishing in about a minute's time. So, Ian, do I keep everything? At the moment, yes. I'm out of storage though, so that might change at some point. Do I sing while I work? No, I can't sing. You do not want to hear me sing, Stephen. And yeah, Timber says coloured tar grout is not cheap in the UK either. It's not particularly cheap, but you don't use a lot of it. So, you know, a kilogram bag in, I think I've got 3 kilos in beige, and I've had one bag for 20 years, and I've done a lot of stuff with it. So you don't necessarily use a lot of it. And that's why it comes out very cost effective. Because you cut it with sand as well. You can cut it with more sand to make it go further. So there we are. And it's only a thin scattering on the top, unless you're like me and you're making paste and plastering it on. Boogalug's last question I'm going to answer, what's the best way to stick stand to a base? If I just say glue, does that sound a bit odd? I would use white glue, and I would, if it's a slopey base, I put the white glue on first. Normally I'd put the sand on dry and then spray it with isopropyl alcohol and water mix, and then spray with dilute white glue or Mod Podge, and that will be it. There we go. All of my dioramas, Boogalug, have the same way of gluing, so you can go and watch any of them if they've got soil and you'll see how I did it. So it's a fairly standard technique. We'll see it probably in a week's time, in a month's time on this diorama as well. We'll be onto that stage next. So yep, great, thanks guys, thanks for coming. Been great to chat to you all, and have a great week. Try and get some modelling done, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments as well. Take care. Right.